Prince of Persia, an action-adventure series about a notorious Persian prince and his divine and twisted adventures, sometimes saving a princess from an evil wizard to saving an entire kingdom. The franchise has seen its success ever since the release of the first game. It has also seen its fair share of downfall and was abandoned for over a decade. But now, with the announcement of the new game in the series, I think it's time to take a look back at the history and evolution of the franchise throughout the years. So, welcome everyone to Gamevolution, and this is the history and evolution of Prince of Persia. Prince of Persia, released in 1989 for Apple II computers and later ported over to numerous other computer systems, home consoles and handhelds. It was created by legendary John McNair and distributed by Broderbund Software. The game's story is set in medieval Persia, where players take control of a titular unnamed protagonist on a quest to save a Persian princess who is held captive by an evil wizard who seeks the Sultan's throne by forcing the princess to marry her while the Sultan is away fighting a war. Now, it's up to the players to help the protagonist to go through many dangerous dungeons, solving numerous puzzles, defeat the evil wizard and save the princess, all in a cinematic platform gameplay. The game was very popular for its fluid character animation, which during the time of series was unheard of. The game designer John McNair revealed that they use an engine called rotoscoping for the character animation, which worked wonders for the game, as upon release critics praised the game for its art and animation, action and realistic platforming, calling the game a groundbreaking release, while also calling the game's story not so groundbreaking, giving the game an overall rating of 9 out of 10. And on the commercial side, game was not an instant success, as the original Apple II version sold only 7,000 copies. It is then when the game was ported over to other numerous computer systems of the time and to home consoles and handhelds, the sales of the game started to go upwards, with a lifetime sales of 2 million copies. Prince of Persia: The Shadow and the Flame, released in 1993 for MS-DOS and was later ported over to Macintosh, Super NES and FM Towns. Developed and published by Broderbund Software, this time the game was not programmed by John McNair, although he did help to design the game. It is a direct sequel to the first Prince of Persia, but this time the story of the game follows the prince who is trying to return to Persia and defeat the evil wizard once and for all, who has assumed the appearance of the prince and seized the throne and has put the princess under a death spell. Now, gameplay wise, the game is very similar to the first one, running, jumping, avoiding traps, solving puzzles, etc. But this time the game is very combat heavy, where in the first game there were not many enemies, appearing only at one at a time. This time up to 4 enemies could appear at once, and just like the first game, you fight them with a trusty sword. Now, upon release, the game received mixed reviews from the critics, but most critics praised the game for being a faithful sequel, and some even calling the game better than the first one, giving the game an overall rating of 7.8 out of 10. And on the commercial side, the game was an instant hit, selling better than the first one in its initial release, despite being released on a pure hardware, with an estimated sales figure of 750,000 copies. Prince of Persia 3D, released in 1999 for Microsoft Windows, developed by Mindscape and published by Red Orb Entertainment, and later was ported over to Sega Dreamcast, this time developed by Avalanche Software and published by Mattel Interactive. And just like the name suggests, unlike the previous title, this time the game is a 3D action adventure with all the elements of previous 2 titles, with players again controlling the prince as he tries to save princess from the captivity of another Persian prince. After recently married prince and princess visit the kingdom of Sultan's brother, where things gets quickly escalated, as it turns out that the Sultan has already promised his brother to give the hand of the princess to his son, which was broken when the prince married the princess after saving her from the evil wizard. In the conflict between the two princes, Sultan gets killed, who asks the prince to save the princess from his brother's son, who is a half human and half tiger. So it's up to our hero to save the love of his life. Upon release, the PC version of the game received favorable review. Then the Dreamcast version, which was mostly sold negative reviews, and according to McNair himself, the game is considered as the weakest title in the series with an overall rating of 7.3 out of 10. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, released in 2003 for Microsoft Windows, Xbox, Sony's PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube. Developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft. Also, a side-scrolling 2D platformer version of the game was released for Nintendo Game Boy Advance. The story of the game follows the unnamed prince. Here, the prince and his father with their army invades a kingdom where, during the invasion, Prince retrieves a dagger, also known as the Dagger of Time, as it contains the sense of time and could be used to reverse the time. And with his father retrieving the hourglass, also containing the sense of time, and during their visit to Sultan, where they present the hourglass as a gift, an old wizard tricked the prince to releasing the sands, turning everyone into vicious monsters. So it's up to our friends to retrieve the hourglass and use its power to correct its mistake and save everyone. Gameplay wise, it's an action-adventure puzzle platformer with player controlling the prince in a third-person view. Upon release, game was praised by the critics and players alike. Critics praised the overall game design, sound, gameplay and graphics, with most criticism coming towards the camera control, which sometimes could be out of control, with an overall rating of 9.4 out of 10, and commercially, game was a huge success, selling in 2.4 million copies across all platforms. Prince of Persia Warrior Within, released in 2004 for Microsoft Windows, Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube. Developed and published by Ubisoft. Also, an PSP version was released in 2005, named Prince of Persia Revelations. Developed by Pipework Software and published by Ubisoft. It's a direct sequel to The Sands of Time. The story of the game takes place after 7 years from the first game, where the prince is searching for a way to stop an entity called the Haka that is relentlessly pursuing for the prince as a punishment for his meddling with the Sands of Time. Here, Prince travels through many mysterious lands, faces many kinds of enemies along the way in an attempt to stop the Empress of Time from creating the Sands of Time in the first place, hoping it will stop the Haka. Gameplay wise, it is very similar to the first game, an action-adventure puzzle platformer with many additions such as ability to wield two weapons at the same time and expanded combat moves. Also, the game has more darker tone than the first one, and upon release, game mostly received positive reviews, with critics praising the gameplay and the graphics, while also criticizing the game's darker tone and grimmier atmosphere, scoring an overall rating of 8.3 out of 10, and commercially, the game has sold more than 1.9 million copies across all platforms. Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones, released in 2005 for PC, Xbox, PS2 and GameCube, and a censored version of the game was released for Wii and PSP in 2007, developed by Ubisoft Montreal and Casablanca, published by Ubisoft. The story of the game is the direct continuation from both Warrior Within and The Sands of Time. Here the prince returns to his kingdom only to find out that his actions in the Warrior Within has undo everything that happened in The Sands of Time, and the evil wizard has returned and has absorbed the Sands of Time, turning himself into an immortal monster. So it's up to the prince to join forces with his past love, which he met for the first time in this timeline, to stop and defeat the evil wizard once and for all, and save the world and his kingdom, while fighting against his own counterpart known as the Dark Prince, who is slowly taking over his mind and body. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, it is very similar to both Warrior Within and Sands of Time, with addition of a new combat move system and fighting mechanics. Upon release, the game received mostly positive reviews, with critics praising the game for its story, characters, level designs, graphics, combat and a new speed kill mechanic, while the Wii and PSP version received mostly negative reviews, with an overall rating of 8.5 out of 10. And commercially, game sold a well over 1.5 million copies across all platforms. Prince of Persia, released in 2008 for PC, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and macOS. Developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft, the game is a complete reboot of the franchise with no connection with the original trilogy nor with the Sands of Time trilogy, making it the second reboot for the franchise. The story of the game follows an unnamed character who is lost and finds himself on a mysterious land after getting diverted by a sandstorm. Here he meets a princess, and together they had to re-imprison an evil entity who have corrupted the land after getting released by the princess's father. The gameplay of the game is very different than the other games of the series. Running and jumping and running on walls to progress are there, but the combat system, camera control and overall tone of the game is very different than the previous titles. Upon release, the game received mostly positive reviews from the critics, praising the game's acrobatics, combat, and the new graphic design, giving the game an overall rating of 8.3 out of 10, and commercially, the game sold at well over 2.5 million copies across all platforms.
Soldiers. Let's try some magic.
Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands released in 2010 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and a side-scrolling version of the game was released for Nintendo DS and PlayStation Portable. And also another version of the game was released for Nintendo Wii, developed and published by Ubisoft. The story of the game is set between the events of the Sands of Time and Warrior Within, where the titular prince is visiting his father's brother to learn about the leadership, where the kingdom gets invaded, with invaders seeking Solomon's army and supernatural force imprisoned within the palace. The king's brother released the Solomon's army, hoping they will help him to turn the tides against the invaders. Despite being warned by the prince, Solomon's army turns on everyone and start killing and destroying everything on their way. So it's up to the prince and king to save everyone and the kingdom. Upon release, the game received mostly positive reviews, with PSP and DS version of the game getting mostly mixed to negative reviews from the critic, who give the game an overall rating of 7.5 out of 10. Now, before we end our video, let's take a look at a quick overview of the franchise. So it's been 34 years since the release of the first game in 1989, and with a new entry in the series slated to release in 2024, that makes a total of 10 games in the series, with the 2008 reboot of the game Prince of Persia being the highest selling game in the series with 2.5 million copies sold, and Prince of Persia 2: The Shadow and the Flames being the lowest selling game with 750,000 copies sold, and Sands of Time being the highest rated game in the franchise with an overall rating of 9.4 out of 10, and Prince of Persia 3D being the lowest rated with 7.3 out of 10. And so with that stats, we can conclude that despite being abandoned for over a decade, there's no doubt the impact of the franchise in the world of video games. And now with the announcement of the new game Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and an official remake of the Sands of Time in the works, the fans of the franchise can hope for its comeback better than ever. Now I think it's time to end the video here. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next one.